Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third spotlight in February 2026. Okay. Now, by the way, just for those of you who are catching up on everything that we're doing, we just had a live stream yesterday with Intisam. She was talking about remote viewing with the remote viewing practice. So if you go to our YouTube channel and you go to the live section, you can see that just happened yesterday, which was really great. So we're trying to have lots more live streams, especially with instructional stuff, but also going out into the, beach, getting UFO photography. That's going to be happening in March. It's going to be really great. And anyway, there's a bunch of other things popping, but the one great piece of interesting news that I have for you today is, yesterday or something, President Obama casually announced seriously that there are aliens, that the aliens are real. Now, he was on a podcast and he was asked, are aliens real? And he said, yes, they are real. And he said he hasn't seen one, but he knows that they're real. And the interesting thing is that the interviewer had no follow-up questions. So from my point of view, he must have planned this. He must have said, ask me this one question, I will give one response, and then no more. And then they went on into other topics. So it's not being covered in all the major news on the front pages or anything like that. But if you Google it, Google Obama, alien news, whatever, you'll see but it's always like not front page stuff. It's all over the place. And Fox News, a bunch of news places, including Fox, says that Obama was joking. Now, of course he was not joking, but the point is that talking about the extraterrestrials, it affects even Obama, President Obama. So you can't sort of say we're not getting our message across if even President Obama can't get the message across. I mean, this society has some weird stuff going on. Weird stuff. Anyway, and talk about the news being bought off, corrupt and everything. I mean, if it affects President Obama, it affects us as well. We'll see how that goes on. He might be pressured behind the scenes to sort of retract it or whatever. But you can see video recordings of it. He's clearly not kidding. Anyway, so that's sort of interesting. But today's spotlight is it's deep and it's really interesting and it's also light. But I'm going to take you through a cycle. We're talking about choices and the consequences of those choices. And to convey this idea, I want to give you how it affects on the individual level and also how it affects on the macro societal level with regard to the Disclosure podcast. So let me explain. Okay, this is really interesting. So in today's spotlight, I want to tell you a tale of two parallel dramas, two very real dramas. And by seeing those two dramas in the same light, I personally think that you'll be able to see the situation that humanity is in currently and how serious the situation actually is. Now, I'm going to frame drama number one as a drama involving a young woman and two men. Now, the young woman and two men are not people who I know personally. Rather, they are three archetypes that I have drawn from a great many relationship videos that I've watched on YouTube. And as I have mentioned to all of you previously, I love, like, whatever, to watch relationship videos on YouTube. They are lots of fun to watch. Not because I am looking for relationship advice, although there can be some gold nuggets in the mix, but rather because I see the dramas that are described in those relationship videos as parallel to larger macro events such as is facing humanity today, especially with respect to the ongoing drama of civilization crises and the disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence on Earth. Now, I could pose this drama number one in terms of any gender, but I will choose today to start with a stereotypical setting of a young woman trying to navigate her life in the context of a polluted information pool. Yes, right. that has surrounded her for a very, very long time. Now, this, again, is not someone I know personally. She is just an archetype, but a useful one. So let's establish the setting so that we can later transpose this situation involving the young woman to the current situation involving all of humanity in this time of escalating crises. Well, let me warn you now that this is not a comfortable analogy, and it's not meant to be comfortable. Comfort is not clarity. In times of crisis, clarity matters more than comfort. So, to begin, young women often find themselves being hit on by a horde of men who try to get their attention, almost always for the purpose of having sex with the women. So, we start with a woman in an environment of male attention. Now, there are two types of men who we will discuss today: the beta male and the alpha male. And before I go further, let me make something clear. These are not people I know personally. They are archetypes. And this analogy is not about male superiority, female failure, or gender politics. It is about information distortion and the psychological consequences of misreading character under polluted conditions. Okay, now, the alpha-beta terminology is a shorthand used in modern relationship discourse. It describes two very different behavioral postures. Now, one is based on control and insecurity, and the other is based on boundaries and self-sufficiency. Now, the analogy works because it is emotionally charged, and it needs to be. But the target of this discussion is not women or men, it's perception under distortion. So, the central character in this story is not the man and not the woman. The central character is the information pool. When perception is distorted, judgment collapses. And when judgment collapses, consequences follow. Okay, now if you look at enough relationship videos, sort of like I do, you will see the perception that beta males are far greater in numbers than alpha males. And you will also see that beta males are not described in positive terms. They are considered weak, insufficiently ambitious, not so dramatically handsome, and not rich. And in those relationship videos, you will see that many women are victims of what one might call a propaganda campaign that focuses on those beta males. Now, this happens across all social media, but especially Instagram, where women are described as princesses, always beautiful and always of high value. Well, in that propaganda campaign, women are told that their guy is insufficient, that they could have chosen better, that as high-value women, they deserve better, and so on. And eventually, many of these women, they believe that onslaught of propaganda, and many women act to throw their guys out, including getting a divorce if they are married, but also by throwing out or dismissing boyfriends. Now, they see their guys as too boring, no spark, dull. They get into all types of disagreeable situations with their beta male boyfriends, and the boyfriends just seem to take all of it on the chin and keep on going. The women eventually tend to deny their guys sex, which is the central element of intimacy for many men that does not diminish in time. And despite all of this, the beta males keep on working like a dog, hoping that the women will one day see all their hard work and finally value them for what they are and ultimately reward them with the love and attention that all men so deeply desire. Well, when dealing with beta men, it often seems that you can torture them endlessly, and they will simply take it. And eventually women take their beta male counterparts for granted. thinking that they are all stupid and easily controlled. And I have to say, to some extent, they may be correct. That is one of the characteristics of beta males. They stick around far too long in unhappy situations, hoping for a future that never seems to arrive. All too often, such couples eventually break up, and in the United States, 83% of all divorces are initiated by women. After the breakup, the women are often euphoric, finally free to get what they want from life. And that includes getting the romance of their dreams. And if you watch enough of those relationship videos, you will find that many of those women eventually deeply regret their decisions. They realize that those Saturday morning pancakes that their guy used to cook are no longer there. They realize that when they have an upsetting experience at Walmart or someplace, they no longer have a telephone number to call to someone who would reliably listen and comfort her. And then they realize that their guy is now waking up every morning with someone else. And that someone else now has his ear. And finally, they realize that they lost. They realize what they lost. They had a beta male, but those beta males had many good qualities. He may not have been the most handsome or the most wealthy or the most ambitious, but he was still nice in his own ways. And the women realize that it is too late to get that beta male back. That is when they finally realize that it really is over, and she lost. And there may not be a second chance at fixing all of this. And the challenges of life may end up being faced alone. Now, let us say that the male who the young woman is involved with is an alpha male, not a beta male, but an alpha male. How does that story differ from the one with the beta male? Well, in general, alpha males do not threaten. Why should they? There is no need to try to control their women. If a woman is not giving them what they feel they want, they just move on and find a different woman. You see, threats are only made by beta males. Threats are used in an attempt to control a person, to instill fear, so that the object of the threat does what the beta male wants. But no one wants to be controlled, so women will always react negatively to threats, including threats to leave. And the information pool that is available to most women, it's just so terribly polluted with propaganda, it is not easy for a woman to recognize the difference between a beta male and an alpha male. So what do alpha males often do? That's the question. Well, they often tell their women that they will change their own behavior by a certain date, the so-called line in the sand, if their women do not change. But that is not a threat. It's simply information. It is not usually said with anger, but rather with cold clarity. But the women have a terrible time telling the difference between a threat voiced by a beta male trying to intimidate the woman and an alpha male simply telling the woman when he will act differently. For the beta male, it is a threat. But for the alpha male, it's simply notice. But from the woman's perspective, especially within the context of a hopelessly confusing propaganda campaign expressed through social media, it is just confusing. The difference here is not dominance. The difference is posture. A beta male threatens because he is trying to control an outcome, but an alpha male informs because he has already accepted the possibility of loss. A threat attempts to manipulate behavior. A boundary simply defines consequence. A threat tries to alter your will. A boundary accepts your will. To someone living inside a polluted information pool, the two feel identical. But they are not identical. So what is that young woman in drama number 1 to do? Well, if you believe the statistics that are piling up these days, she will probably not change her behavior to keep her alpha male, and her assumption that all men are the same will prove to be incorrect. She may try to pull him back, but it will not work. Not being able to tell the difference between an alpha male and a beta male, the woman will get the all too common result. The woman will lose her man, a man she could have happily kept if she understood the type of man that she had. The polluted information pool blinded her, and she now faces the consequences. Now, let's pivot and use this example with respect to today's situation involving all of humanity. Today, humanity is experiencing a series of very, very serious crises. The crises have not yet all hit completely, but it is clear that the tensions are building and that an ultimate shakedown is going to arrive. Economies are going to collapse. Leadership cadres are being disgraced in terms that were previously considered impossible, and I'm assuming you understand we're describing things like the Epstein files and so on. The wars seem as inevitable as they seem endless. Moreover, all of these crises seem to be building at the same time, like a tidal wave that will soon hit the shore. Not one wave, a convergence of waves, economic, political, military, institutional, all rising at once. And we must address the big elephant in the room, which is secrecy. Secrecy is now a means of governance. It's not secrecy as exception, used rarely, but rather it's secrecy as the standard operating system. It is not that some people keep secrets, rather the entire infrastructure of government, the entire infrastructures, multiple, do really stupid and terrible things. That means to people as well as the systems, really terrible things. And all of these things are hidden from societies. The masses are told lies to cover up the terrible things, and the major media are all bought off so that they cooperate with the cover-up. And that includes things such as Google and YouTube searches, which are all too often constrained by censorship and shadow banning. Alternate news sources, friends, alternate news sources such as Telegram channels are some of the very few places left where true information can be obtained by anyone, and only those who are the most alert know about such sources and how to find them. So, let's make the parallel between the young girl in drama number 1 and all of humanity, who is victim to the propaganda campaigns waged by governments, governmental leaders, and the major media. You see, the information pool across all important subjects that is available to the masses is terribly polluted, just like the information dating pool that is available to young women following the social media feeds. So it is nearly impossible for the masses to know their true situation, and thus to make clear decisions regarding their future. Look at it this way. Think of the current situation, which we at Farsight have described so many times. A situation where Earth is a prison planet controlled by the bad ETs who have manipulated human leadership to the point where everything is corrupt. The bad ETs have orchestrated a psychological campaign that completely inhibits the human audience from even seeing that they are being controlled in the first place, or even knowing that the ETs exist. And this even affects the so-called channeling community, where truly honest, hard-working, and sincere human channels are manipulated into becoming mouthpieces for a propaganda campaign that keeps even that community from seeing what is actually happening on this planet. The information control net is complete. And just like the young woman in drama number 1, what hope does either have in making a clear decision to make the best and safest choices? Consider the situation of the group of extraterrestrials, who we at Farsight call the good ETs, who want to free humanity from the planetary prison. What the heck are they supposed to do? Listen, the good ETs are free will beings. They insist, and for good reason, that all people must make free will decisions as to what they want, although there is tremendous wiggle space regarding what is actually a free will decision. It is possible that the bad ETs can manipulate human leadership so that a decision is made to align humanity with the bad ETs, and some may say that the manipulation negates the criteria of a true free will choice. But this is the situation we are in. Free will, but messy free will. And nothing is truly clear-cut when choices are made. But the free will good ETs still insist that some type of free will decision, however imperfect, must be made by humanity in order for the good ETs to be able to intervene and force the bad ETs to depart from the solar system. And remember, President Obama just the other day acknowledged that the aliens exist. So this is real, folks. Humanity must make a choice, even within the context of a polluted information pool. And this is like the young woman in drama number 1, needing to make decisions that will keep her man and safeguard her future. And just as the young woman in drama number 1 must make that decision within the context of a very polluted information pool, she must also consider the character of the man she is dealing with. And she may not be able to tell the difference between a beta male, around which there is more wiggle room, and an alpha male who will not try to control her, but who will leave if she cannot figure out what is what before that happens. So, the good ETs are like the alpha male in drama number 1. Did you all hear that? The good ETs are like the alpha male in drama number 1. They have informed humanity through many of our communications done at Farsight, and presumably in other venues, that if they cannot get humanity to make a free will decision to align itself with the good ETs, then the good ETs will leave. Now listen, folks. It is not a threat. They're alphas. Alpha males and the good ETs do not make threats. Remember that threats are intended to inspire fear and instill control. Alpha males do not do that, and good ETs do not do that. They inform, they do not threaten. But if the recipient of the information cannot sort out what is what soon enough, it becomes too late. The woman does not keep her man, and humanity remains in a state of slavery and extreme levels of horrific human trafficking. The alpha male is gone, not to punish, but simply to choose a different path. And the good ETs have left, not to punish humanity, and they were never threatening humanity. They are simply operating according to compatibility. Free will entities cannot coerce alignment. They can only remain where alignment exists. Withdrawal is not domination or punishment, it is boundary. Alignment cannot be forced. Presence cannot be compelled. Compatibility determines proximity. Moreover, the bad ETs know that the good ETs will leave if they cannot obtain a free will decision from humanity, even a messy one. So the bad ETs focus their psychological control efforts to maximize the level of confusion that exists in society. And that includes the creation of non-stop planetary crises that keep humanity always in a state of panic and uncertainty, never able to settle down and sort out what is happening. So, it seems that the main way forward from the perspective of the good ETs is the need to challenge the information control system, even temporarily, that the bad ETs have put in place. So, when information control becomes total, tensions accumulate beneath it, an economic strain, leadership disgrace, war, institutional failure. These are not random, they are pressure points. And when enough pressure accumulates, containment fails. This is not orchestration, it is systemic overload. The crack in the joint is not an act of malice, it's the release of accumulated force. And their apparent strategy is to encourage a rapid cascade of planetary crises, economic, political, leadership, disgrace, and war, in order to overwhelm the information control system that keeps humanity psychologically bound. And this cascade will enable a moment in time to arise where a free will decision is possible within the context of a society that is momentarily not constrained. If containment cannot hold, then escalation will follow. If containment cannot hold, then escalation will follow. And when pressure exceeds capacity, systems fracture. This is not strategy in the theatrical sense. It is physics in the structural sense. Okay, now I have to say something here. Let me be transparent. I am assuming that keeping the alpha male is preferable. I am assuming that aligning with the good ETs is preferable. That is my bias. I am not neutral in this story. I am choosing a side, and you may disagree. But understand what your disagreement implies. Every choice carries consequence. Refusing to choose is also a choice. You may believe that control is safer than freedom. You may believe that independence without assistance is stronger. You may believe that remaining in the current system is wiser. If so, follow that reasoning honestly to its conclusion. But do not pretend that there are no consequences. To be honest, I wish this was all that we have to consider with respect to freeing humanity. However, there are deeper, more entrenched elements that challenge us further, believe it or not. Listen to this, folks. This is so interesting. Since the early 2000s, research has occurred in political science suggesting that political behavior can be predicted and thus caused by one's genes. That is correct. For example, in a pioneering study by 3 scientists, that's James Fowler, Laura Baker, and Christopher Dawes, that was published in May of 2008 with the leading journal of political science, which is the American Political Science Review, they reported that genes can influence whether individuals turn out to vote. I'm not kidding, they did. And other studies have focused on the influence genes have in determining someone's ideology, whether someone is conservative or liberal. I'm not joking, it's for real. For example, in a study by John Alford, Carolyn Funk, and John Hibbing, published in, again, the American Political Science Review in May 2005, those scientists found that political orientations such as ideology, whether you're conservative or liberal, could be influenced by the genes. And such studies typically look at twins who are separated at birth. I'm not talking like a couple. We're talking thousands of cases they've looked at. And the twins are raised, after being separated at birth, they're raised in different family environments. Sometimes the families would be conservative, sometimes they'd be liberal. And basically, it turns out that the environment doesn't matter as much as people previously thought. What really matters is the genetic makeup of the individuals. Twins, raised in very different family environments and not even communicating with one another, they tend to have very similar political views, like carbon copies, indicating that it was not the environment that determined how they thought politically, but their genes. Can you believe that? Their genes. So when you think of why people think the way they do, you need to consider more than just their thoughts. Some thoughts are baked into the genes. But baked is not locked. Genes influence probability, not destiny. Predisposition is resistance, not prison bars. And resistance can be overcome, but not without force equal to its depth. Well, in our research done here at Farsight, we have found that extraterrestrials have been involved in manipulating the gene pool among humans for a very, very long time. That is one of the reasons why it's so difficult for people to have remote viewing and telepathic communications, things that are normal everywhere else in the whole galaxy. And part of this manipulation that the ETs have done appears to include resistance to thinking about the extraterrestrials themselves. President Obama just said the other day that the aliens exist and it's not being covered in the major news. Isn't that sort of evidence? Ever wonder why so many people are so quick to dismiss the idea that the extraterrestrials even exist, that UFOs or UAPs are real? And then when we at Farsight talk about the good ETs and the bad ETs, ever wonder why this is so challenging for so many people to consider? We show our data. We supply transcript data sets with data collected under perfectly controlled blind conditions that can be analyzed scientifically, and it does not penetrate deeply into the collective consciousness of this planet. We even find it challenging to convince mainstream outlets that remote viewing is a real phenomenon. And it's not just that Google and YouTube shadow ban our results so that the results are hard to find in traditional researches. And it is not just that the searches for remote viewing in such search engines supply very dated results that are very non-threatening to existing status quo ideas. All that is true. But the audience is also preconditioned to filter out certain types of ideas that could cause the masses to recognize their true condition and their true situation, and then to revolt. There are very likely deep genetic conditions that assist in the imprisonment of humanity on this planet. And it would be very foolish to think that an extraterrestrial civilization advanced enough to travel across the galaxy would not have long ago mastered methods of genetic manipulation of planetary populations that they wish to control. So, waking up a population such as humanity on this prison planet is not easy. Think of the energy it will take to get humanity to turn around mentally and see their situation clearly, to cast off the influence of the corrupt planetary leadership, the compromised mass media, the manipulated and polluted information pools, and yes, even their own genes. Do you realize what would be necessary to break a population such as this out of Earth's psychological prison? How much power this would require? That is what the good ETs are up against. They want to free this planet. They want to help you. They are truly committed to trying to free all Earthlings. But the depth of the imprisonment across so many dimensions is so extensive that the good ETs must strive to break open a great many imprisoning boundaries all at once. If you can see this, then you can understand why the good ETs are trying to trigger a simultaneous collection of civilization crises that will have the power to break the hypnotic control that the bad ETs and their human leader collaborators have over the masses. Only when the control structures of the entire system collapses will there be a window in time where the good ETs may have a chance of reaching the minds of the masses during a moment when a free will decision to ask for help from the good ETs may be possible. Whew. To the best of our ability at Farsight to sort all this stuff out, that appears to be the game plan. And that appears to be the goal. If this is the strategy, then the logic becomes unavoidable. If deep imprisonment spans information, psychology, and even biology, then shallow disruption will not suffice. But hold on. Before we go down the rabbit hole of despair, let's pivot. And let's consider our situation from the perspective of a fairy tale, a very powerful fairy tale. It suggests a path where success is possible, very possible. Hans Christian Andersen told a story called The Emperor's New Clothes. Perhaps many of you remember that one. Many people remember the title, but not everyone remembers the structure. So let's go over that, okay? In the story, two con artists arrive in a kingdom and they tell the emperor that they can weave a magnificent suit of clothes so extraordinary that they are invisible to anyone who is stupid or unfit for their office. The fabric, they claim, can only be seen by the wise and the competent. Well, the emperor, not wanting to appear foolish, agrees. His advisors, not wanting to appear incompetent, also agree. The tailors pretend to weave the fabric. They set up looms. They make gestures. They describe the colors and patterns, but there is no cloth. Nothing is there. And when officials are sent to inspect the progress, they see nothing because there is nothing to see. But none of them dares to admit this. To admit that they see nothing would mean that they are stupid or unworthy. So each one pretends to admire the invisible fabric. Now, eventually, the emperor himself goes to see the suit, and he too sees nothing. But he cannot admit that, so he praises the cloth. The entire court joins him in admiration. And finally, the emperor parades through the streets wearing his new clothes. The entire population has heard the same story, that only fools cannot see the fabric, so everyone applauds. Everyone pretends. Everyone participates in the illusion. Until a child, too young to fear social consequences, simply says, "But he has nothing on." And suddenly the spell breaks. The emperor was not hypnotized. The population was not genetically stupid. The illusion held because the information environment made it dangerous to tell the truth. The cost of dissent was higher than the cost of self-deception. The emperor walked naked, not because no one could see reality, but because no one felt safe acknowledging it. What is striking about the story is not the foolish emperor. It is the collective participation in the illusion. Everyone could see, but no one would say. That is what polluted information environments do. They do not remove reality. They raise the cost of recognizing it. And when recognition is costly enough, psychologically, socially, politically, entire societies can live inside illusions that are visible to anyone willing to speak. Now, in Anderson's story, the illusion collapsed not because the cloth disappeared. It was never there. It collapsed because the fear of speaking dissolved. So let's bring this back to the young woman in drama number 1. How can the young woman discern the difference between a beta male who uses empty threats to intimidate and control her and an alpha male who may love her deeply but who simply tells her what will happen if such and such does not change? The answer is not demanding that the woman become more intellectually discerning in an intellectual sort of way. The time of crisis is not the time for pursuing a path of academic achievement. Rather, what is powerful in the new emperor's clothes is not the formal education of the child who declares that the emperor is naked. Rather, it's the innocence of the child that saves the day. It is the lack of preconditioned thinking that matters. It is the ability of the child to simply accept boundaries rather than to challenge them. The message in this fairy tale that relates to the young woman is simply to acknowledge the boundaries as boundaries, and then decide if those boundaries are acceptable to her own boundaries. It is not whether she can succeed at controlling her man, beta or alpha. It is whether the stated boundaries of each are acceptable to her. She needs not consider how to control her man. Rather, she needs only to see the reality of her situation innocently, without the added ingredient of wanting to control another human being. If a beta male wants to control her with threats, and she wants to control the beta male to maintain his servant status, then they are both just like the members of the emperor's court. No one is seeing reality as it is, because everyone is trying to control their position with respect to everyone else. It is only the child whose innocence is free from the motivation of control that freedom from the illusion of invisible clothing can be broken. So the young woman in drama number 1 does not need to control anything. She only needs to see clearly. And then the truth of her situation will change from confusion to clarity. Now, in terms of humanity's current situation with respect to crises and disclosure, we don't need more intellectually powerful minds to save the day. The world is already filled with intelligent people with advanced degrees, and none of those intelligent people or their degrees seem to be sufficient all by themselves at cracking this problem. What is needed is not intellectual power, but rather innocence in observation. And I'm not attacking education, okay? I'm a professor at a major university. I'm not attacking education at all. I am attacking over-conditioned cognition. Now, we can see that what our world requires is something that can be achieved under conditions involving a set of civilization crises of sufficient depth and magnitude. So what the goody teas seem to be attempting is not hard thinking on the part of the masses. Rather, they seem to want innocent thinking, a type of thinking that will be able to discern truth without overpowering effort. And this, my friends, is something that I think is achievable. I would add one more thing. To be honest, we do not know the full plan of the goody teas. We do not know the exact and ultimate element that will cause humanity to crystallize its thinking such that the correct choice of freeing choice is made. The goody teas must have an idea of the best specific trigger that will have the greatest probability of success. Success not in controlling the outcome, but in enabling the potential of a free will decision. That specific trigger has not been determined, at least not by us at Farsight. So friends, you see, we are learning along with you. We know what the game plan is. We know what the goal is. But the details are still a mystery, even to us. So, friends, I ask not that you follow us blindly. Rather, I ask that you learn with us, together. That is the real goal. Not that we achieve a particular outcome, but that we grow within the context of our shared experiences. Friends, that is what I wanted to talk with you about today. And I thank you very much for listening. We had a great turnout, in fact. Really great. And this type of thing is complicated to be able to summarize in a minute or two, so I'm really grateful that you listened to the entire thing. I want you also to remember that clicking on that notification bell after you subscribe to our YouTube channel is the only way YouTube will let you know that the live streams that we're starting are actually happening, including the ones we're going to have in March, which are in remote locations in the middle of the beach, which are going to be really very surprising for you. And if you are subscribed to our streaming service, FarsightPrime.com, that's where all of our major content is. Now, when we do the live streams in these remote locations, this is how we're planning on doing it. We're going to do the live streams, and those are going to be recorded also. For example, when we're shooting videos of extraterrestrial spacecraft, we want to really hammer in the idea that it's easy to do that. So we're going to be at the beach doing that in the middle of the day. And we're going to be showing you how we're doing it. But then we're going to be taking the actual footage that we get and editing it, and that's going to be going up on FarsightPrime.com. So the live streams of doing everything live will go up on YouTube in the live section. But the results of the actual stuff, where we actually edit it and show you the UFOs, which honestly is amazing. Every time we do it, we get so many, and they're so crazy amazing. That's going to all be going up on FarsightPrime.com, and we're going to be having a lot of that. So it's not just the UFO recordings. We're actually planning on doing a lot of other things in these locations. And March is when we're going to be starting to do that, simply because the weather is a little better. So if you subscribe to FarsightPrime.com, you really get your money's worth. We don't really consider FarsightPrime.com to be similar in any way, shape, or form like Netflix or Paramount Plus or Disney. Those are entertainment venues where you spend leisure time watching movies. We consider FarsightPrime.com essential for you when you're trying to navigate what's actually happening in this world during this period of extreme crisis. So we deeply appreciate all of those of you who support us on FarsightPrime.com. That's the only means of support we have to do all the stuff that we do. And remember to sign up for our free email newsletter that you can find on our website, farsight.org. I won't go into all the other things that are available on our website, including all the transcripts of everything, including transcripts of our spotlights. But it's got a ton of stuff up there. So that's it for today, folks. I want to thank you so much for being here, listening. And again, the turnout is great, and you're going to see me again next week, next Sunday, right here on the Spotlight for Farsight. Talk to you then, okay? See you in a week. Oh, and by the way, we are releasing a major mysteries project sometime during this week. It's finally getting to the point where we can do that, and it's about mind control efforts by the government, extreme mind control efforts with high technology and everything, and so we're doing that. And also the ET board meeting, it's last month's ET board meeting, we're finally going to be releasing that this week as well, and those will all be available on FarsightPrime.com. Okay, everybody, I love you all. Thank you so much. And I will see you in a week, all right? See you there.